if you dare to question, to think independently, to value traditional old liberal ideas of having a wide and rambunctious public debate where all voices are accepted, doesn't mean they're right. You can criticize them, you can push back on them, but that's the whole point. You can push back on them. You're not going to be regarded as a heretic who'll be burnt at the stake or who'll lose their job for pushing back on them. Like, if your vision is not one of a liberal demos, an arena of free speech, but your worldview is, look, we only take people who agree with basically the framework that we've set up and that we all agree on. I think that opens the door to a very pernicious place. And clearly a lot of Americans do as well, because that's getting used cynically by people who feel as anxious as I do about that as a way to hoodwink them and cajole them and bully them and frighten them into voting for noxious individuals who want to undermine American democracy. So I think the stakes are a lot higher than people give it credit for, on the left give it credit for, when we start playing this game.
Yeah, I don't really have an acute problem with anything you said there, although I do think there are certainly some examples of in academic departments where the departures from some of the norms would genuinely just the entire fit thing. It's like, I don't really want to debate it on its merits in individual cases, because the real concern I have with this entire discussion is that in the absence of policy, the American right wing has chosen to cynically blow up the relative importance and frequency of what you and I are talking about to make it the issue. They lie about it. They exaggerate. They tell stories about accommodations, about, cat litter boxes in bathrooms for students that identify as animals. So I think this is a great conversation. And the problem I have with it, even we're doing it right now, if someone doesn't know what's going on in the US and they come in and they hear the last 15 minutes, they will almost certainly come away thinking that this sort of thing is far more central to the main problems that the country is facing right now. I don't think that it is. I think economic issues, healthcare, our lack of dealing with the climate, the fact that education is so pathetic in so many parts of the country. There are so many other issues that I think are more important. I think voters generally agree, which is why what you see on Reddit and Twitter does not always end up reflecting the way that elections go. So I think it's a perfectly fine conversation. On the specifics, you and I will mostly agree. But the problem that I see is the right has tricked people into thinking this is really what's at the foremost of the minds of the American voters, when it is not.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree that it is a total sideshow to what really matters, and I'd agree with your list of those things. The climate chaos probably being maybe the most important thing, because I think it's going to have knock-on effects to so many other things. I think the cost and stress and just sheer hassle of constantly dealing with deadly wildfires and hurricanes is just going to drive everybody up the wall, and it's going to make it much harder to get anything else done. But the only thing I would add to that, or maybe push back on, is that underpinning our ability to address any of those things is the viability and sustainability of American democracy. And to the extent that these stories are getting manipulated and misused, and they're essentially being used as the laser pointer in front of the cat, or the keys jangling in front of the face of your 15-month-old, to distract voters from what really ails them, which are largely questions of economic justice and environmental justice. And to the extent that the new social justice orthodoxies on the left empower that, and I'm not talking necessarily about one-off examples of Yoel Inbar. I'm also talking about the reframing of what justice means from a conversation around economics and class to a conversations around identity, race, gender, and so on. And I think that is a real pivot that's actually happened in the past 10 years, that there is now a sense that the colorblindness of, forget about Mandela or Martin Luther King or Gandhi, even the colorblindness of someone like Obama is now seen as somewhat passé and naive, and that the real justice mission is in turning the dial up, not down, on our self-consciousness about our own identities, turning the dial up, not down, on our own sense of energized tribalism, turning the dial up, not down, on our fear that we are all scrambling for a piece of a finite pie and that our identities are what should define how much of that pie we get, there is a change in rhetoric on the left from one of universalism and economic justice and class to one of identity. And that shift is empowering and pouring petrol on the fears that you're talking about on the right. And my concern is, again, I don't want to spend all our time banging on about how bad the left is, but if the only people who are calling out the left for the problems in that shift are cynical right-wingers, then we're going to have a problem, which is why I think it's actually worth people like me spending time trying to gently coax my colleagues on the left to be more sane, because I fear that they're holding a dance party and pouring fire onto a bonfire that nobody wants to get out of control.